Good morning students and welcome back. Today we will learn history. Lesson number 1, Historiography, Development in the West. In this chapter, we will study the tradition of historiography, modern historiography, development of scientific perspective in Europe and historiography, and about the notable scholars of the Western countries. So, we will learn how history developed in the West, that is, in the European countries. Students, did you ever thought how history, that means about the past, was written by the historians? We only pick up the book and read it and gets the knowledge about the historical era. But to write those books, lot of historical research is carried. And to verify the knowledge of past events, the chronology and the interconnections are linked. Chronology means the sequence, the timeline, events held one after the other, that is serially, and their interconnections, that means First World War and Second World War events are interconnected, linked to one another. Research are of two types. One is physical and natural science, and second one is historical research. In physical and natural science, empirical method is used to verify the available knowledge. Empirical method is a scientific laboratory method. That means experiments can be done, observation and conclusion will be made. For example, if I wanted to know Newton's law of motion, then I can do experiment and find out. Laws will be same today also. In science, laws are fixed. But is it possible in history to do experiment? For example, we want to know why Marathas lost third battle of Panipat. Then can we do battle and find out the reason? No, history cannot be recreated. And it is not possible to formulate any fixed law in history. For example, Shivaji Maharaj won the battle with 50 soldiers only. Can we apply that strategy now also? So, history differs as per the time and space. In historical method, we can verify by getting information, what happened in the past, finding out the details related to it. Historical research cannot be done by you and me. We need an expert who has expertise in particular field, and there are various experts who does research on history. For example, to verify the written script, we need an expert who knows the language and script of a historical document to read and understand its meaning. The expert examines the authenticity of the document. Authenticity means the originality of document. Lettering style, author style of writing, date and type of paper, stamps of authority, all this research will be done by the expert who knows language and script. We also need expert who has done study in archaeology. Archaeology means the scientific study of materials found of olden era, that is bricks, seals, Harappan civilization, statues, etc. So archaeologists study the articles found and declare, for example, bricks found are of Harappan civilization. We require an expert who has studied in archival science. Archive means to store things. And the one who does the study of original written document, that is Vedas, handwritten book of ancient period stored in archives. That research is called archival science. Then we require a person who is expert in manuscriptology. Manuscript means handwritten book. In ancient period, books were written by hand. So expert does the study of script and language. Then we require an expert who has studied epigraphy. Epigraphy means study of inscriptions. So earlier, before writing on book, man used to write, that is, did carvings on stone, caves, walls. So the one who does the study of inscription is called expert in epigraphy. Similarly, then we require an expert who is good in field of numismatics. That means one who does the study of coins of olden times. The one who have knowledge of coins of different era, that study is called numismatic. Then we need an expert who is good in genealogy, that is study of lineage. That is again the study of ancestors. So, for example, Babur was the first Mughal emperor in India. Then his son Humayun, then Akbar. So study of ancestors in line is called genealogy. So in order to have a thorough knowledge about the historical research, we require people who are expert in all these fields. Now let's learn historical research method. The first one is critically examining of various sources of history. Suppose old document is found. Expert then will do the critical examination. That means will verify whether it is historical document, is it of ancient era or of any other era. Does critical examination and then prove that it is of certain period. Second one is examining relevant references of the available historical information. Relevant references means related documents or things. Suppose got coins of Shivaji Maharaj and one written document of Shivaji Maharaj. So in document it was specified that Shivaji Maharaj has started his coins. So coins and documents are relevant references and proves that this coin was used during Shivaji Maharaj period. Third one is collecting historical information, highlighting the process that lead to historical transitions, carrying out comparative analysis. Transition means change. For example, earlier was gold coin, then silver coin, then metal coin. So this was the transition of coins. So why this transition of coins takes place? What are the reasons? Why coins material kept changing? This comparison of analysis will be done. Fourth one is understanding the references regarding time and space of the given historical events and also various conceptual frameworks used in historical research method. The references that we get tells us about the time and space. For example, Vedas written, it gives us idea of Vedic religion, hymns, prayers. It gives us concept on what framework Vedas was written. Similarly, all books written has various conceptual framework which help in historical research. Fifth method is formulating relevant questions in view of the historical references. That means when any olden document is found, then the question arises. For example, take coins. How old is this coin? In which era this coin was used? What is inscribed on the coin? Coin is made of what material? Such relevant questions should be formed and answers should be found while doing research using questions. And the last, sixth one is formulating hypothesis. Hypothesis means to come to the conclusion. For example, seals of Harappans were found in Mesopotamia's archaeological site. So this gives conclusion or forms hypothesis that Harappans used to do trade with other countries. Now let's learn the tradition of historiography. Before that, we will see what is historiography. History means old or past event and graphy means writing down. So, the writing of critical historical narrative is known as historiography. For example, the person who is writing a book on Battle of Panipat. So he is narrating to us the story of Battle of Panipat. The one who is writing such narration is called historian, and writing of critical historical narration is called historiography. Historiography are of two types: tradition of historiography and modern historiography. In ancient time, there was no historical narration in writing form, but it does not mean that they were not aware of the historical time. Ancient people used to pass the stories of the life and valor of the ancestors to the next generation. So it was done in a form of oral source of history. That is, cave paintings, storytelling, singing songs, and ballads. Ballads means poems. These are the traditional means of historiography. And thus, traditional history means are looked upon as the sources of history in the modern historiography. Now let's learn, do you know? The earliest inscription of the Louvre Museum. The above picture shows a fragment means small piece of stone. Fragment of the earliest inscription. A forward marching file of soldiers holding shields and spears is seen here. The general is in the front. So, this inscription tells us that war used to take place and what weapons were used in the war. That is shields and spears. The tradition of recording historical event can be traced back to Sumer civilization in Mesopotamia. Sumer is the earliest known civilization in the historical region of southern Mesopotamia, and now it is called southern Iraq. Names of Sumerian kings and the stories of battles fought by them have been preserved in various inscriptions. The earliest inscription shown above dates back to 4500 BCE, that means before Common Era. It records a battle fought between two kingdoms. It is now displayed at the Louvre Museum in France. Now let's learn modern historiography. Modern historiography means learning history with scientific method. So let's learn four main characteristics of modern historiography. The first one is its method is based on scientific principles. It begins with the formation of relevant questions. That means we need to prove scientifically that it was a historical document or object with the formation of relevant questions. Second characteristic is these questions are anthropocentric. It means that these questions are about the deeds of the members of ancient human societies of a particular period. History does not suggest any interrelation between the divine and human deeds. Anthropocentric means all related to human beings and society only. And history is related only to the man and not to any of the God or divine creation. Third characteristic is answers to these questions are supported by reliable evidence. Evidence means proof. So whatever answers of relevant questions are given, it should have proof. Just orally said any answer will not be accepted. Fourth characteristic is history presents a graph of mankind's journey with the help of past human deeds. That means man's development from the ancient period to modern period. It shows a graph how man has made progress at all stages. It is said that the modern historiography with above characteristic has its roots in the ancient Greek historical writings. History is originally a Greek term. Herodotus, the Greek historian of the 5th century BCE, used it first for the book entitled The Histories. Earlier, events were said in BC, that means before Christ. But now the events are called as BCE, that means before Common Era. Now let's learn development of scientific perspective in Europe and historiography. Till the 18th century, Europe has made progress in the fields of philosophy and science. Later then, scholars started believing in the possibility of studying social and historical truth by applying scientific method. That means people do not believe in only listening stories, but started searching scientifically and believing in history with proof. Prior to 18th century, prior means before 18th century, all European universities were interested in philosophy around divine phenomena. That means related to God. It was all based on mythological discussion. But this scenario began to change and was clear to people that history is related to mankind and not about God or divine. Then in 1737, the Göttingen University was founded in Germany, and this university was the first to have an independent department of history. That means in this university only historical research and studies was done. Then other German universities also became centers of historical studies. Now let's learn the contribution of notable scholars of Europe who has contributed their philosophy and thoughts in the development of historiography. First scholar is René Descartes. René Descartes was the first scholar who insisted on verifying the reliability, that is, truth of historical document by critically examining them. He specified the rules based on scientific method in his book Discourse on the Method. He said never to accept anything for true till all grounds of doubts are excluded. That means You must do detailed research till you get satisfied with all proof. Now let's learn about the next scholar, Voltaire. Voltaire's original name was François Marie Arouet, that is pronounced in French. He was of France. He opined that, along with objective truth and chronology of historical events, considering social traditions, trade, economy, agriculture, etc., was also equally important in historiography. That means, he said, historical events are not only to study in chronological order, but also to learn about social tradition, that is, society, trade, economy, agriculture. In short, whatever is related to human life should be equally studied in history. Even lifestyle, culture, worship, clothes, food, everything what man did in his social life should be studied. So his thought gave rise to modern historiography, and Voltaire is said to be the founder of modern historiography. Next scholar is George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Hegel was a German philosopher. He insisted that the historical reality should be presented in a logical manner. Like all scholars, he also believed in scientific principles and not to have any imagination in history. To him, the timeline of historical event was indicative of progress. He said that timeline gives us the record of events happen in chronologically order, but it is not fixed. Timeline will keep fluctuating as new historical research will keep on coming in future. So many scholars were convinced by Hegel's philosophy of timeline and believed in quality history by scientific method. The collection of his lectures and articles are published in a book entitled Encyclopedia of Philosophical Sciences, and his another book, Reason in History, is also very well known. Now let's learn more about Hegel's philosophy. According to Hegel, to understand the true nature of event, one should understand the opposite of event also. For example, true or false, good or bad. That means one must know both the nature of a thing, true and false, good and bad. So this method of analysis is called dialectics. So in this method, a theory is written first, which is called thesis, and then opposite of thesis is written called antithesis. And then after a logical discussion of both thesis and antithesis, a new thesis is prepared or conclusion will be done, which is called synthesis. That is, combination of both thesis and antithesis is synthesis. Now next we shall learn about Leopold von Ranke. Leopold von Ranke of Berlin University also said about the critical method of historical research. He stated that historical documents need to be examined carefully. That means with evidence. And he put importance on information gathered through original documents. He believed that with this method, it was possible to reach the historical truth. He criticized imaginative narration of history. Collection of his articles is published in 2 books. One, The Theory and Practice of History, and the second one, The Secret of World History. Now next we shall learn about Karl Marx. Karl Marx was a famous philosopher of Germany. According to Karl Marx, history was not about abstract ideas. It was about living people. Abstract ideas means imagination. That means history is not about imagination. It is about living people, about the human relationship. He said that human life is divided into class, higher class, lower class. So there is struggle of class. Higher class who owns production dominates lower class. So there is inequality in society, which leads to class struggle. Das Kapital is a German word, means the capital. So his book Das Kapital is one of the referred book all over the world. Now next we shall learn about Annales School. At the beginning of the 20th century, a new school of historiography arose in France, which is known as Annales School. Annales School gave a new direction to history writing. We have learned about the scholars' contribution in modern historiography, and their thinking has changed the mindset of people, that history is not only about learning the political events, kings, great leaders, politics, diplomacy, and wars, but also learning about the climate, local people, agriculture, trade, technology, means of communication, the psychological of people in the historical times. That means the changes took place in climate, how the cities developed, what food grains were grown. So scholars started looking at history not just from a political angle, but also from social human angle. So all these thoughts gave rise to the Annales School. The Annales School was started by French historians. Now next we shall learn about the feminist historiography. Feminist historiography means the restructuring of the history from the perspective of women. That means we started to look at history from a female point of view, their status in society, how women were treated, injustice done to women in society. All this thought gave rise to feminist historiography. One of the pioneers from feminist historiography was Simone de Beauvoir. She was from France. Her writings had helped in establishing the fundamentals of feminism. The feminist historiography emphasized not only on the inclusion of women in history, but also on the rethinking of the male-dominated perspective of history. That means women should also be given equal rights with men in society. It focused in depth on various aspects of women's life, such as employment, whether women were doing jobs, were they given right to set up industry or trade business, how was their family life earlier. So writing of all these points about women is called feminist historiography. After 1990, women were portrayed as an independent social class. That means after 90s, women started getting equal rights, freedom, and to be independent in society. Now next we shall learn about Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault was a French historian of the 20th century. He wrote a famous book, Archaeology of Knowledge. Michel Foucault also believed in the philosophy of all scholars. but he came with one unique thought, that arranging historical events in a chronological order is not right. He drew his attention to the fact to reach the ultimate historical truth by learning various transitions in the past. That means, he said, learning events in chronological order, that is one after the other, is not important, but to study this transition, that is change what takes place from one event to the other, is important. For example, after Mughals came in India, what change took place is important to learn rather than learning about the ancestors of Mughals in line. So, Michael Foucault called his method the archaeology of knowledge. Foucault also stressed on the areas such as psychological disorder. That means how man's thinking has changed. Science of medicine, that is from Ayurveda till now, what transition had taken place. And prison administration, that is change took place in punishment. So Michael Foucault said that all such events should also be included in writing history. So students, here we finished learning the first lesson of history. We have learned tradition historiography, modern historiography, historical research, and about the contribution of European scholars in development of historiography. So, go through the lesson once again. Goodbye and take care.